first item is going to be our vote on the approval of the agenda. Moved by Waukee, seconded by City of Des Moines. Any discussion on the agenda?
Whole city.
Whole city.
I didn't say anything.
All right, still ramping up on.
Yeah. I don't even know what's going on.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Hey,
Opposed, same sign. All right, agenda is approved. Moving on, we have our October meeting minutes that require a vote.
move approval.
Moved by Des Moines, second by West Des Moines. Any discussion on the meeting minutes for October? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Moving on to our report and vote of calendar year 2025 meeting dates. Turn this over to Dylan.
Thank you. We've got meeting dates for you to approve, and we're showing you the technical, executive, and policy. Really, we're just asking for the executive here. I do want to point out we are proposing a change to what we've traditionally done. Traditionally, we meet the Wednesday, and that this is part of the confusion that it can cause is that it's the first Wednesday after the technical committee meets. And so that's sometimes the first Wednesday, sometimes the second Wednesday. It's hard to get calendars lined up when we want to do just a mass calendar invite for the year. So we're proposing that it moves to the first Thursday. And by doing it, we not only fix that calendar problem, but it also allows staff to focus our attention on creating agendas only during those 2 weeks. We have technical and exec that first week, policy on the third week. It also gives us a week in between so that if there's something that comes out of exec that we need to follow up on, it gives us a little more time to do that. So we're not having a couple of days to get the agenda back out for policy. It gives us a little more time to do that. So that would help staff be more efficient. Hopefully it wouldn't affect you all unless there happens to be a meeting that you have a meeting that first Thursday of the month. Just changing the date for you a little bit. So I'd be curious if there's any feedback on that. Otherwise, that would be our
Move approval.
Moved by Des Moines, seconded by Joaquin. Further discussion? Yeah. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Meeting dates have been moved, and we'll get calendar invites out shortly. Moving on, report and discuss. We have mobilizing tomorrow final draft. All active.
Thank you. Staff has been spending about the last 18 months or so developing updates to the region's long-range treatment plan mobilized tomorrow. The deadline for this is final approval will occur next week by the policy committee meeting. All the final content is posted up on the website. Just a quick update on reminder of kind of what our approach was to this update. It's not a full-blown overhaul of the previous plan. It was more of some minimal updates throughout the document, focusing on kind of a reformatting and redesign of the existing document, cleaning up language, trying to make it science public. There was some content reorganization as well. There were some chapters that we decided to organize things by mode rather than how it was past plans. So we'll see here in a minute. We've got chapter, so on and so forth. The measures and targets have their own chapter in the previous plan. All that's kind of combined. Vision mode sections. And then the state of the system, kind of existing visions of our. Those were all included in an appendix to the previous plan. We pulled that. And then as well, we update all. That's why the majority of the work was to make sure that all the data is updated throughout the plan on the growth scenario, this analysis, measures. I would make one note about the growth scenario. We did get quite a bit of feedback on that. Some of these weren't necessarily comfortable with what the growth scenario numbers were. We do have it to address that in the coming year. Try to make some changes to how we do that. As far as the plan content goes, there are 4 main chapters in the plan. The first chapter is introduction. It kind of goes over the history of transportation, planning in the region, other regional plans that for this document, as well as kind of outlining what's the the document as well. Chapter 2, as I mentioned, these are the three kind of node-based chapters. So chapter 2 focuses on bridges. Chapter 3 is life pedestrian and transit chapter, and then chapter 4 focuses on aviation and freight. Each one of these chapters has a similar structure. It starts out with talking about existing conditions, safety system, so bridges and what their current condition is. It then focuses on the measures and targets that have been set for mode, and then finally it has a discussion about physical capacity and then a list of projects. As well as those four main chapters, there's 11 appendices that are kind of provide background material to chapters. So if anybody wants to really dig into the methodologies that went into the various different fiscal analysis, all that information can be found within those various according to our public participation plan, we do need to have a 3-day public comment period that's required for GP. So staff released the draft document back on September 23rd, and then closed the public comment period on October 23rd. We collected online public comment throughout that 30-day period. We also posted a public house on October 9th, and incorporated, we were able to incorporate comments received. Some of the comments we did receive on the draft content, we got comments from the Moines, Hill, Roundtable. Comments focused mostly on the transit chapter, made a few updates based on their comments. We got some comments from Hill related to the freight and aviation chapter. I had seen more language there about rail projects, so we the state rail plan and pulls projects in there. We did reach out to the railroads, see if they had more information for us. They got back to us on that. So in the future, we'll probably still continue to try to get in touch with them. But they're not the easiest to get. The freight roundtable also had some comments related to transload facilities across the country. So we did more information in about additional transload facilities. As far as online comments we received from the general public, there were a number of comments we got that didn't really relate to any of the real content in the plan, so we didn't make any changes, but all the comments we did receive are documented in the which kind of goes into an overview of the topic. So the approval of this document fulfills our obligation to US DOT to develop an LRTP for our region and update it every 3 years. Approving it ensures that the MPO can tip, making sure that we got those projects programmed. We don't have a long range plan. Our tip is kind of how that process works. We did present this information to the technical last week, and they recommended that policy. That's all I have for you. Happy to take any questions.
Is this, I mean, you mentioned this, is this the kind of 4th year, or is this a larger update that got the history of how this compared to the prior update?
This is the update that we do every 4 years. Update was November of 2019. Okay. 5 years, sorry.
Fair enough. So this would happen again in 5 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So is this a living document piece that minor updates can occur between now and that 4th or 5th year? I'm just thinking about the autonomous vehicle thing that are upcoming and will show in your face here next year. You really have to talk about it here, but it's probably going to have some impact. I don't know, waiting for 4 or 5 years to get that.
We can amend the long range plan.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Zach. Move on to transit staffing transition plan.
Yes, thank you. We've been in talks with the personnel committee, and a lot of this is an extension of the human capital plan that we went through that was approved back in September. just to give a little bit of history, 18 months or so ago, we were at 10 employees. We're currently down to 7 employees, and then we have Zach as our contract. His contract ends at the end of this calendar year, so at the end of December, and that was really what prompted this conversation to happen. We had the intent to hire additional staff, but we wanted to hold off until after the human capital plan was done. But we do have budgeted in there for additional planning staff. So what we did is we went to the personnel committee last month and had a conversation about extending Zach's contract, tweaking the contract a little bit to extend it into next year, and had a little resistance to that. I think there was some feeling that we have that capability to do that in-house. We should be having additional our own staff and not doing contracting to staff. Asked us to go back and look at this a little bit closer. So that's what we've done. Wanted to share this with you, and not just in the context of only Zach's contract, but also what's the overall transition and how does overall staffing look as we move forward. So really what we want to do is outline a transition plan. And part of that would be to continue using, in this case, short-term to allow for some transition, but also to backfill that with hiring a full-time planner to get us back to that full planning capacity. Now, I mentioned we had 10 employees. We're down to 8, essentially, if you include Zach with that. My goal is to get our planning staff back to where it was. We had some administrative, we used to have a director and assistant director. We don't need both of them. So there will be just a reduction in staff because of that. We also lost the SERPA contract with one of those positions. But the goal with this is to get us back into having 5 planners, basically. We had 5 planning staff before. This will get us back to 5 planning staff moving forward. So if you step through the next slide there, this shows you the work on the left-hand side is the stuff that Zach has been doing. And then on the right side, showing how we're going to transition that and getting additional staff in the mix. Some of that is the staff we already have. And then you'll see on there a couple places, new planner, the people, the person that we hire. And the goal with this, and we're only talking about those specific things that are Zach's target area right now. But overall, with everything we do, trying to build redundancy into the system. We don't just have one person working on something, and if that person were to leave, it's apart. We want to have multiple staff on these various things. So this is showing what Zach has been working on, but we're doing this across the board. So you can see here, we've got things under a plan going forward, who's going to take this on. Then, sorry, if you jump to the next slide, kind of showing how this transition goes. So like I said, Zach's contract currently goes to the end of December. What we're proposing is a kind of a 2-phased 6-month extension to that. So the first 3 months would be a little more intensive. There'd be an up to amount, but it really boils down to about 15 hours per week is what that averages out to. And then in the last 3 months, it would be dropped down to 5 hours per month, a little over 1 hour. That would allow time to offload and get some additional staff trained on the things he's working on. While at the same time, you can see on the bottom, the Gantt chart, hiring a new planner. So we'd start the recruitment process here in the next couple of months. And so as Zach's time winds down, we're building up that planning staff we would hire. If you go to the next slide, this shows kind of the same thing, but all those various tasks and how that transition would happen. So some of those, the training is already happening now. Some of the projects don't start until January, February timeframe. So doing what we can to build that training, but I think it'd be best if we could have been working alongside of Zach, create the manual and they have to read from it down the line. Ideally, that would be the way. So next steps, like I said, that kind of 2-phase contract. In terms of the contract, in terms of the hourly amount, would change. That would come out to about $21,000 and a little bit of expenses in there. That would require a budget amendment. That's the next item on the agenda. We can talk through. And then the other part of that would be starting to like I said, we talked to the personnel subcommittee last month about this. I followed up with this. I had a conversation with most of the personnel committee, and I think if you're a little more agreeable to this, I'm looking at Joe and Linda, the two in this committee. Joe, I'll I'll open it up if you guys have any thoughts or comments you want to share. But otherwise, this would be the recommendation of staff.
Part of it is obviously we don't want to leave the organization flat-footed either. We want to make sure that his experience and expertise to be able to get staff ramped up on these projects. We did pretty much set a final end date. Absolutely nothing after June. Initially, we talked about nothing after December, but obviously wanted to provide that cushion and make sure we got to take care of it. So I think this is a good compromise for everybody. I know it's going to be difficult losing that, but it's part of the mix.
Yeah, I reiterate the comments. Zach, you've been awesome for this organization. We appreciate everything you've done. We wish you wouldn't have moved, to be honest with you. So, going forward, we've got a plan in place that we need to follow in the handbook. It's like, having dollars paid to employees need to be spent locally and in our region. Obviously, we want to get people trained under you to be able to get that accomplished. We wish you the best of luck.
Any other comments on
I would just comment that in general, I think it is something that should really give an organization pause to lose institutional knowledge over a remote engagement. I think the world has shifted in the last 4 years. My entire team is in Minneapolis and I work with them remotely every day. I think I would really caution us against that kind of thinking. And
I think the world might be switching back.
I'm saying institutional knowledge should be lost.
I understand completely.
All right, is there anything else? We'll advance this to the policy committee then. Moving on, we have our fiscal year 2025 budget amendment number 1, Dylan.
Thank you. This builds off the last item, and there's a couple other things going on here. So one, like I mentioned, the former staff compensation, increasing that. There's currently a line item in the budget that was only for the first 6 months of this fiscal year, so we'd extend that based on the compensation we just had. There's a minor thing in there. When we last did the employee handbook, we changed the longevity bonus structure. I failed to incorporate that into the budget, so that would be a small $1,200 increase. And then there's a third item. We currently have a contract for travel demand modeling consultation, and that's part of the long range plan update. That contract was approved by the board, extends over 2 fiscal years, but the second phase of that didn't get into this year's budget. So we'd be this year's budget to fully fulfill that. To offset that be $60,000 roughly of additional expenses to offset that. Like I mentioned in the previous item, we do have budget in there to hire additional staff. One of those positions would be for the full fiscal year. We haven't hired anybody yet for that, so we can use that savings that we have spent to extend that contract onto Zach. And then the other part of the travel demand model, we do have a budget surplus of $35,000 roughly. So we can dip into that by almost $13,000 to offset the rest of it. We did have a meeting with the budget finance subcommittee yesterday. They reviewed this and endorsed it. So we'd ask the same of this group. If there's questions about any of that, happy to take it.
Any thoughts? I'll move on to representative selection process.
This is sort of a MPO 101, if you will, but just wanted to reiterate how we go about our representative selection process as we get to the end of the calendar year and communities are going to start appointing representation for your regional boards for next calendar year. So there's kind of a multi-phase process that happens here with depending on what committee you're on, what size of community you come from. We have the appointments to policy and the technical committee that everybody makes because every community gets at least one representative on those 2 boards. And then depending on the community size and the geographic area determines the makeup of the executive. So if you go to the next slide, I'll walk through that. First of all, the process for the communities under 50,000. for all of these, we will send out probably by the end of the week a notice to your city clerk or whomever, city manager and so forth, letting you know you need to be doing this, first of all. But we'll want the technical and policy committee representatives named by the end of December, ideally. And then when it comes to the executive committees, for the communities under 50,000, you belong to one of those three sub-areas. See if they're the idea in the bylaws, what the bylaws prescribe, I should say, is that the mayors or the county supervisor chair from those communities get together and pick who their two representatives will be to this executive committee. So we'll need that to happen. So it's kind of a two-phase. One is each community nominates who they want to serve on that. And then once we have those nominations, those communities get together and they pick the two representatives. How you pick those two representatives, we kind of defer to the communities of how you want to do that. We just need to know who the final say is, who the final answer is. For the communities over 50,000, that's a little more straightforward. They have permanent representation on this committee, so that West Des Moines and Des Moines, and Polk County also has a permanent designation on the committee. If you go to the next slide. So when you get your form, you will just name your technical executive and policy committee. Once we have all of that done, probably February timeframe, the chair appoints a nominating committee. And then from among those executive committee members that we know of, so maybe reps, also the sub-area representatives, from that, we choose new officers. Once the new officers are selected, their term goes from March 1st through the end of 2026. So it's a little convoluted of a process. I come up with several years ago when we thought about this. But that's what we have right now. So if there's any questions about that, happy to take them. But we just wanted to give a reminder to everybody before.
Any questions? All right. Moving on, service transportation block grant set aside program schedule.
Want to give you a quick update on the 3G schedule coming up. Applications will be posted on the website on December 2nd. We have those due by January 10th. We have pushed that deadline to submit them out about a week. We have the comments that coming back from one time. So we have pushed that out a little bit from last year's. And then applicant presentations will happen sometime in March. And the transportation alternative program make you aware that they'll be coming up here. That's any questions you got.
Questions? Thank you. All right, moving on to informational items. This was formerly our consent. As we move towards away from voting here, if there are questions related to any of these, now is an opportunity for the exec committee to inquire about those. Question about item D, the carbon reduction funding. Has that committee met?
They meet on Friday. So by the time the policy committee meets next week, we will have their feedback and recommendations. Whether they change it or not.
Anyone has any questions about any item on any of those four items? Now's your opportunity.
How much funding is left?
If we look at through fiscal year 2028, there's about 1.1 million. Right? If we go through 2029 and assume that one, about 1.6 million a year is what the target.
That's guaranteed with the next administration also?
That's the no. That's the thing that we don't. That's the targets we've been getting from the DOT. However, the actual funding was only guaranteed through fiscal year 2026. So we're already working in some faith that it would have continued. We don't know what's going to happen.
I'd say highly down.
Yeah, our new government efficiency. Accountability, or what it's called.
So it's very possible that some of the funding, because we awarded recommendation was for 4.4 million funding, really only 2 point something of that is guaranteed through that fiscal year. So it's possible we would have to come back in a couple of years at some point and either make that up through another way through SDG funds or sorry. Okay. Those are things we'll talk about.
Other questions regarding where we had a question about finance statement, contracts, expenses, program amendments.
I will point out on the contracts expenses item, there was one contract to be amended. That is for our contracted tool, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. The only change is to extend the deadline. The contract currently will end at the end of the calendar year. However, we want to retain them to be able to work beyond the end of the calendar year. We're not targeting that plan will be completed until February. And then also part of the contract is that they will do a grant application for the next round of implementation dollars to the federal government. Again, same caveat applies. We don't know what that's going to look like. However, when we initially signed the contract, the notices of funding availability had been released in the fall. That's since switched to the spring. So the next round won't be until March or so. This will allow them to work. Doesn't change budget or anything. It just extends technically.
Any questions? All right, we'll just, any other items of interest committee want to bring up?
One, just want to give you a quick update on the comprehensive safety action plan. The consultant team is completing they just wrapped up a map that shows the scored segments of the committee to develop a scoring system to help prioritize projects across the network. They're also currently reviewing the scores and identifying locations where they can present recommendations and develop concept layouts for those various different priority locations. They are going to meet with staff next week internally just to go over what their initial thoughts are on where those locations would be. And then at the tech committee in December, we'll be meeting with them discussing those locations as well. So next month, we'll hear more about what the consultant team is recommending for priority locations for the comprehensive safety action. Just want to give you a heads up on that if you're aware of the best out here.
Thank you. Anything else?
The only other thing I have, and we've kind of touched on it already, is just the unknown now with the post-election and knowing what the new Congress is like. We'll send out in the post-meeting email. There's an article that came out yesterday in Bloomberg they interviewed Beth Osborne with Transportation for America. She's spoken to our group in the past, and Transportation for America transportation advocacy organization to which we belong. It was pretty insightful of at least what her thoughts, the different organizations we're members of are starting to have a post-election analysis coming out here in the next couple of weeks. And probably right now, we just don't know. We'll keep you informed as we learn.
Nothing else. Our next meeting is on December 11th at 11:30. Thank you everyone for your time today.